The road was too quiet. A narrow French lane. High hedgerows on both sides. Morning mist hanging low like smoke that hadn't decided where to settle. The lead Sherman tank rolled forward slowly, its steel tracks grinding against broken stone. Inside the turret, Sergeant Miller felt it. Not fear. Expectation. "Something's wrong," the driver muttered. Ahead, barely visible through the haze, logs were stacked across the road. Thick oak trunks. Heavy. Deliberate. A roadblock. Miller didn't order the tank to stop. He knew what usually followed roadblocks. Panzerfaust teams hiding in hedges. Anti-tank mines buried beneath the logs. Machine gun nests waiting for infantry to dismount. Stopping meant dying. "Full throttle," Miller said calmly. The driver hesitated. "Sir?" "Full throttle." The Sherman surged forward. Instead of smashing bluntly into the logs, something else hit first. A sharp, steel projection mounted low on the front hull, shaped like a brutal spear, tore into the wood before the tank's main body even made contact. The blade bit deep. Logs cracked. The hedgerow behind the roadblock splintered as the tank didn't stop. It punched through. Gunfire erupted from the bushes, too late. The Sherman was already through the barrier, turret rotating, cannon firing into the ambush positions before German soldiers could adjust. In less than 30 seconds the trap collapsed. Inside the tank, Miller allowed himself a small breath. Without the blade mounted to the front, they would have stalled. And stalled tanks burned. The problem nobody wanted to solve. By late 1944, Allied forces had a problem they didn't expect. It wasn't just German resistance. It was the terrain. The French countryside was a maze of thick hedgerows, centuries-old walls of earth and roots, sometimes 5 feet thick and reinforced with stone. Farmers had built them generations earlier to divide fields. To infantry they were annoying. To tanks they were nightmares. Sherman tanks were powerful, but they weren't designed to climb vertical dirt walls. Every time a tank tried to push over a hedgerow, it exposed its thin underbelly armor, the weakest point, directly to waiting German anti-tank gunners. German soldiers learned quickly. They'd let a tank nose upward, belly exposed, then fire a single Panzerfaust into the soft armor underneath. One shot. One fireball. Crew gone. American tankers began calling hedgerows green coffins. The solution at first was brute force. Engineers tried explosives. Artillery tried blasting openings. Infantry tried clearing ahead. But every method took time. And time meant casualties. Something had to change. The idea born from scrap. The breakthrough didn't come from a general's office. It came from a frustrated tank crew staring at a wrecked German beach obstacle. Months earlier, the Germans had placed steel anti-landing obstacles along coastlines, large metal frames designed to rip open the hulls of landing craft. After Allied forces secured those beaches, scrap metal from those obstacles lay scattered across fields and depots. One American sergeant looked at the jagged steel beams and saw something else. What if, instead of climbing hedgerows, tanks could bite into them? Instead of lifting upward, they could punch forward. Field workshops began cutting sections of heavy steel and welding them onto the front of Shermans. 4 or 5 jagged prongs extended outward like the teeth of a massive rake. Crude. Ugly. But effective. The first time a modified Sherman tested it, the result shocked everyone watching. The tank didn't slow. It ripped through the hedgerow like paper. No climbing. No exposed belly. No easy target. Word spread fast among armored divisions. The device earned a nickname among crews, the Rhino. And once mounted, tankers refused to go into hedgerow country without it. German surprise. German defenders noticed something strange. Ambushes that had worked perfectly for weeks suddenly failed. Tanks were no longer pausing. They were breaking through unexpectedly, at angles and speeds that ruined carefully prepared kill zones. Anti-tank teams found themselves caught mid-reload as Shermans burst through earth walls they believed impassable. One German after-action report described it as, "They come through the hedges as if the ground itself betrays us. The element of predictability, gone." And in war, predictability is everything. Why it truly changed the fight. The hidden blade did more than smash wood and dirt. It restored momentum. Momentum in armored warfare is survival. When tanks stop, they become targets. When they move unpredictably, they dominate. With the blade attached, American tank units could choose their own breach points, avoid predictable road surprise, fortified positions, reduce exposure time. Casualty rates began to drop in units that adopted the modification. Not because the war got easier, but because the tanks stopped presenting easy shots. A field modification becomes doctrine. What started as an improvised battlefield solution soon spread across entire armored formations. Commanders who once hesitated to allow unauthorized welding now demanded it. Workshops operated through the night, cutting steel teeth from scrap and welding them onto Shermans, preparing for the next push. No factory blueprint. No formal approval at first. Just necessity. By the time higher command formally acknowledged the effectiveness of the device, dozens of units had already equipped themselves. It was a rare moment in the war where innovation didn't flow from the top down. It rose from the battlefield itself. And yet, the blade wasn't perfect. In some conditions it caused new risks. In others, it revealed a different kind of vulnerability. And in at least one engagement, it nearly turned into a fatal mistake. That story begins on a rain-soaked morning near a small Norman crossroads, where a Sherman crew learned that even the smartest modification couldn't protect them from everything. The rain-soaked crossroads. It was early September, and rain had turned the fields outside a small Norman village into a mud pit. Visibility was low, and the sky hung like a heavy gray sheet. Miller's Sherman moved cautiously. The rhino blade glinted under the drizzle, mud splattering across the tracks. Ahead, the German roadblock looked familiar. Logs, wire, and a hastily dug trench meant to stop any armored vehicle. But what the crew didn't expect was the hidden trap beneath the surface. As the Sherman approached full throttle, the blade struck a concealed anti-tank mine. The explosion lifted the tank, hurling mud and debris into the air. The crew was thrown forward in their harnesses. For a few terrifying seconds, silence ruled, broken only by the tank groaning as tracks scraped the wet ground. Miller gritted his teeth, forcing the Sherman to keep moving. The blade, though bent from the impact, still allowed the tank to push through the rest of the barricade. They emerged into a clearing where German infantry scrambled to reset their defense. The human factor, crew stories. Inside each Sherman, the tank crew was a unit of 4 or 5 men who relied on each other completely. Miller, the sergeant, had a quiet courage that contrasted with the chatter of younger soldiers. Corporal Jensen, gunner, had a habit of joking during tense moments. "If we make it through this, I'm painting my rifle bright red," he whispered as they approached another roadblock. Private Lewis, the loader, had never fired a cannon in combat before Normandy. The first time he saw the rhino blade tear through a hedge, his eyes went wide. He later said it felt like the machine had a mind of its own. These personal stories made the innovation more than just steel and welds. They turned it into a symbol of survival, a piece of ingenuity that gave real men a fighting chance in impossible conditions. Once crews mastered the blade, tactics shifted. Tanks no longer waited for engineers to clear hedgerows. Commanders realized they could punch through seemingly impassable terrain, flank German positions with speed, force defenders to abandon ambush points, minimize exposure to anti-tank weapons. Even artillery units adapted. Forward observers began coordinating with rhino-equipped Shermans, letting tanks break the first lines before artillery fired, maximizing surprise and effectiveness. It was innovation born of necessity, and battlefield improvisation often outpaced formal strategy. German countermeasures. The Germans, as always, adapted quickly. Reports noted that hedgerows began being reinforced with hidden metal supports, deeper trenches, and secondary explosive devices. Anti-tank teams attempted to lure Shermans into narrow channels where even the rhino blades couldn't maneuver easily. But for every trap, American crews found a solution. Some welded extensions to the original blade. Others added angled plates to deflect debris and reduce the chance of mines detonating under the tank. By the time the Allies pushed deeper into France, the rhino blade had evolved beyond a single steel projection. It became a modular device, field-tested and constantly upgraded by the men who used it most. Personal triumph and fear. Miller's crew survived several dozen encounters with German defenses, each one more harrowing than the last. Yet the story of survival wasn't just about technology, it was about instinct, courage, and teamwork. Every time they breached a hedgerow, fired into enemy positions, or navigated mud-filled roads under machine gun fire, they learned the razor-thin margin between life and death. The rhino blade was their silent partner, a tool that gave them an edge but never replaced the human element. Impact on the campaign. The cumulative effect of this seemingly small innovation was enormous. Across Normandy, casualty rates in armored units dropped slightly, but noticeably German ambushes became less predictable. Allied forces gained momentum in the hedgerow country that had once stalled them. In many ways, the rhino blade represented a broader truth of war. The smallest innovations often tipped the balance between victory and defeat. It wasn't just a piece of scrap welded to steel. It was ingenuity, courage, and the will to survive manifest in physical form. By late September 1944, Allied forces were pushing hard through northern France. German defenses were desperate, and every town, every roadblock, every hedgerow was a potential death trap. Miller's crew, now seasoned and wary, approached a small village outside St. Lo. Scouts had reported a massive barricade across the only road in. Logs, barbed wire, and a deep trench were reinforced with steel plates. It was a death trap, the kind designed to stop an armored advance in its tracks. "Ready the rhino," Miller said. The men nodded silently. No jokes this time. No nervous chatter. Just focus. The Sherman surged forward, steel teeth cutting into wood and earth. Mines detonated nearby, sending mud and smoke across the battlefield. German machine guns roared, but the tank moved too fast, too unpredictably. Within seconds, the barricade was behind them, shattered, while enemy soldiers scrambled for cover. For the first time, Miller realized the full power of the innovation. It wasn't just about breaking obstacles, it was about breaking fear itself, giving men the confidence to move when hesitation could mean death. Across Normandy, crews of rhino-equipped Shermans reported a shift in morale. Soldiers who once feared hedgerows now viewed them as challenges to overcome rather than traps. German reports reflected the same. An enemy that once relied on predictability found American tanks striking unpredictably, forcing defenders to improvise under fire, a psychological advantage as lethal as any weapon. The blade became legendary among armored divisions. Some tankers even painted small rhino silhouettes on their hulls as a nod to the modification. Lessons learned. The rhino blade story illustrates several timeless truths. Innovation rises from necessity. The idea was born in the mud, not in an office. Human courage amplifies tools. Technology alone cannot win. It must be paired with bravery and teamwork. Adaptation is survival. Both allies and enemies were forced to evolve. Even decades later, armored warfare courses reference the Normandy hedgerow problem, and the rhino blade remains a textbook example of improvisation on the battlefield. The last image of Miller's crew remains etched in memory, a battered Sherman rolling across a muddy field, the rhino blade glinting in the pale sunlight, trees splintered in its wake, enemy fire dying behind them. It was more than a piece of steel. It was ingenuity forged in desperation, courage given form, and a symbol of the unbreakable human will in the face of overwhelming odds. In war, tools can save lives, but it is the men who wield them, the decisions they make in split seconds, and the unshakable determination to survive that truly shapes history. And in that small, rain-soaked corner of Normandy, a hidden blade helped write a chapter that would be remembered long after the guns fell silent.